this week, in which they discussed its vision. In this edition is the world. Hello and welcome to WION World is One. Today on this special broadcast of the WION-VOA Co-Production with me, Priyanka Sharma, we'll tell you all about the US-ASEAN Summit as America rolled out the red carpet for Southeast Asian leaders amid increasing rivalry in the Asia-Pacific. Meanwhile, South Korea has a new president, so what does this mean for America? We'll decode all this and a lot more, so let's get started. In a bid to strengthen alliances to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific, President Joe Biden is now hosting the Southeast Asian leaders in Washington during the US-ASEAN Special Summit. Activists, however, are urging him to address the human rights concerns in the region and democratic backsliding, including the 2021 coup in Myanmar. Patsy Widakuswara has this report. Take a look.
Activists worry the Biden administration is sending the message it will tolerate human rights violations by inviting Southeast Asian leaders to the White House, including rotating chair of ASEAN, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen, whose 37-year rule is marked with corruption, repression, and violence.
One of the lasting images of this US-ASEAN summit is going to be President Biden standing next to human rights abusers from Asia. Now, he can mitigate that a little bit by calling out those human rights abuses in Cambodia and other places, Vietnam. But so far, we haven't seen that kind of very clear message from this White House.
9 out of the 10 ASEAN heads of delegations attended the White House dinner Thursday evening, hosted by President Joe Biden. Following ASEAN's demand that they send only non-political representatives, the Myanmar junta that toppled Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government last year did not send anyone. The U.S. supports ideas for ASEAN to open informal channels with Myanmar's so-called National Unity Government in exile.
Very good opportunities for me in order to meet with, the State Department's leaders and the United States leaderships, and at the same time now, of course, ASEAN leaderships are now visiting, and there are a lot of site formal and informal meetings. So it's a very good opportunities for me to be here.
The summit reflects the dilemma Biden is facing as he seeks to balance his administration's focus on human rights and democracy with America's interest to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific and building a coalition against Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
A number of the ASEAN participants have been important partners in calling out the aggressive action of Russia in invading Ukraine, in participating and supporting sanctions and certainly abiding by them.
Saki declined to say whether the final summit communique will mention Russia, which ASEAN has so far avoided in their statements on Ukraine. ASEAN leaders also met with a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers and American business leaders Thursday. The summit will end on Friday. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Joining us now with more insights on this summit is VOA's Jessica Stone. She's live with us from Washington, D.C. Jessica, welcome to WION. Give us a sense of what outcomes you're hearing about this summit. Any announcements that you can share with us at this point?
Well, so far, Washington has announced $150 million in initiatives that range from working on climate change and renewables and green energy in the region, all the way to sharing vaccines and COVID-19 investigative capacities, as well as leadership development. Two key things I'd love to highlight, and that is that the U.S. is sending its first U.S. Coast Guard training team to the region, and this will be working hand in hand with the ASEAN Coast Guards to train them on maritime security awareness. Obviously, this has huge implications for freedom of navigation patrols, as well as fishing rights and natural resources under the South China Sea in particular. And it plays right into what India is already doing in the region with respect to its naval activities and its efforts to secure the waterways. Johns Hopkins School, which is a big university that has an international relations program, it is also going to create a leadership development program specifically aimed at ASEAN young leaders. So there are going to be 3 leaders from each country of the 10 member states that will be invited each year to Washington to do leadership development training, work alongside U.S. representatives and get acquainted with Washington. So those are some of the investments that Washington has announced thus far. And of course, there are sideline agreements in terms of economic agreements as well.
Right, Jessica, thanks for those inputs. Stay with us on this broadcast. We'd like you to weigh in on another story and news development. Let's move on now. South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk-yeol, took office this week, and he has his first face-to-face meeting with the US President Joe Biden next week, as well as his first meeting of the Quad in Tokyo later. VOA's Dong-hyuk Lee sat down with Yoon before his inauguration to get his thoughts on the US-Korea relations as well as the Quad. And here now is an excerpt coming up. Take a look.
자, 바로 질문 들어가겠습니다. 먼저 한미동맹에 관해서 조금 여쭤보겠습니다. 한미동맹이 올해로 69주년을 맞았습니다. 미국 바이든 행정부는 가치 공유를 바탕으로 한 그런 동맹을 강조하고 있는데요. 앞으로 한미동맹이 어떤 방향으로 나가는 것이 바람직하다고 생각하시는지요?
1953년 이제 6.25 전쟁 중에 한미 상호 방위 조약 체결을 시작으로 해서 지금은 이제 군사적인 안보만이 중요한 것이 아니라 이제 뭐 경제 안보, 또 기술 안보, 이제 심지어는 인권 안보라는 얘기까지 나오고 있기 때문에 동맹이라고 하는 것은 서로 상대국의 안보가 훼손될 때 최선을 다해서 서로 돕는 것이기 때문에 이제는 안보 개념이 한미 동맹 역시도 군사적인 안보에서 벗어나서 그것뿐만이 아니라 이제 경제, 첨단 기술, 공급망, 또 우리 국제적 글로벌 이슈인 기후 문제, 이런 또 보건 의료, 이런 모든 부분에서 어떤 포괄적인 그런 동맹 관계로 확대 격상되어야 된다고 생각합니다.
예. 그 바이든 대통령과 정상회담을 앞두고 계신데요. 회담에서 이루고자 하는 성과 몇 가지 꼽으시면 어떤 게 있을까요?
뭐 작년에 문재인 대통령이 바이든 대통령과 만나서 구두 협의하고 약속한 내용들이 있는데 좀 더 내용이 더 보강이 되고 그때 좀 빠진 부분들이 더 좀 보충이 돼야 될 것 같고요. 그리고 특히 그 쿼드 그 워킹 그룹에 관해서 이제 백신 문제만 작년에 논의가 됐는데 그 기후 문제라든지 첨단 기술 분야까지 좀 워킹 그룹의 그 참여 활동 범위를 좀 넓혀야 될 것 같고, 그리고 지금은 또 군사 안보 역시 과학 기술, 첨단 기술에 의존하는 것이 많기 때문에 이런 첨단 기술 분야에 대해서 한미 간에 조금 더 밀접하게 협력을 해야 될 것 같고, 그리고 우리 역시도 미국의 정책을 공감한다, 우리도 함께 하겠다, 이런 것에서 이제 좀 벗어나서 미국과 함께 이 글로벌 이슈에 대해서 같이 고민하고 우리가 해야 될 역할들을 좀 선도적으로 해낼 필요가 저는 있다고 생각합니다.
예.
Right, for more insights, we still have VOA's correspondent Jessica Stone with us. Jessica, thanks for staying on. President Biden is heading to Seoul later this week to meet with President Yoon. North Korea has just launched more missiles towards the East Sea. Does Washington and Seoul, in fact, agree on their approach towards Pyongyang at this point?
Much more so than they did under President Moon, because, of course, President Yoon has a much tougher stance on North Korea. He is making it clear that he wants denuclearization attempts by North Korea before he will agree to talks. That said, in his inauguration speech, he spent time talking about an audacious plan to trade economic engagement with the North for denuclearization of North Korea. Priyanka?
Right, Jessica, just to follow up, after his visit to South Korea, we understand that President Biden will also travel to Japan, where he's expected to roll out the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. What do we know about its content?
Well, it's basically the answer to CPTPP as well as the China-led RCEP, which are regional and large trade frameworks and agreements in the region. But unfortunately, analysts are calling this weak tea because the IPEF, as it's known, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, is not going to have market access guarantees. We don't yet know what types of digital rules of the road it will employ. That said, the United States has said that some of the ASEAN members will join. We'll see if they're joining before the speech in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, this framework is part of the Indo-Pacific strategy that ranges from India all the way to Australia. Priyanka?
Absolutely. Jessica, thanks so much for all those inputs, and thanks for joining us on this special broadcast of the WION-VOA Co-Production. Thanks for joining us.